Cohagen here, Beaver House Hills, this beautiful territory that's been, you know, part of the cultures of the Cree and the Dene and the Blackfoot, the Métis for many years. I think the most important thing when we're thinking about what places we stand on is understanding that the history within these spaces that we're on has a manifestation in how it plays out in communities. So the resistance and exclusion that we've seen from queer folk, against queer folk for all these centuries, you know, for time, a very long time, has been a result a lot of times of the historical elements and the cultures that have oppressed, and that history of oppression that kind of carries through Canada and through all our communities due to that nature of colonization, which still continues today. It all manifests today. And I'm just really grateful for you all here to be here to have this brave conversation. So this was something we put together. We've been able to piece little pieces of money here and there to pull together. We were able to use some resources from Women in Gender Equality Canada to help today. And so we're excited to have you and to feed you and to spend the day kind of just really rooting in together. I know the City of Edmonton is also kind of working, they just are about to release the What We Heard report on the queer action plan. Sorry, I'm going to use language queer because I identify with that. So I'm just going to stop rambling from there. I think that's the John Humphrey Centre is an organization that's just really committed to creating spaces of, you know, where we need to have these difficult conversations, where we need to kind of orient ourselves around human rights. And how do we do that? How do we localize and implement human rights at a real local level? That's what it is all about for us. And we've been partnering with Rarica now for a number of years. I think one of our most sacred partners. And I just want to invite Adebayo up here to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Renee. Thank you. My name is Adebayo. Chris Katiti, my pronouns are he, him, they, them, Manisebo. I'm the founder, CEO of Rarica Now, an organization that supports 2S LGBTQ refugees and newcomers in Canada. And really humbled to be in this room with each and every one of you. I want to first say thank you to Renee, thank you to John Humphrey Centre for Peace and Human Rights for making this happen. And thank you to the team of Rarica Now, thank you to the team of John Humphrey for really supporting our work for all these years and helping us continue to do the work with little to limited funding. Over this month, we've been reflecting on the history and the legacy of trans people, the legacy of Black trans people, of queer people in Canada and around the world, and honoring our ancestors. We have our people who some of us were familiar with, that is Dr. Michael Marshall. I don't know if you were familiar with Dr. Michael Marshall, Cash Bay, and on days like this on Stonewall, we want to remember their legacy and the work they have done to put many of us where we are. If it wasn't Dr. Michael, I don't think I would have been where I am. So I really want to take a moment of silence to honor his soul and Cash Bay. May their soul rest in peace. Some of the conversations you're going to hear might be a bit shaky, but these are our life experiences. These are our lived experiences. This is what we experience. This is what we go through in our communities. And often the time, if you're outside of the experience, you don't see it or you ignore it with the fast-moving world. So it's okay, my morning message is let us slow down, right? Let us slow down, let us listen to the communities that are impacted, let us listen to what is being shared, and I think collectively we can find our way forward. I will stop there and continue engaging with you all, but thank you so much for being here. Kudos to everybody for making this happen. Thank you so much, Renee. Raven is a co-founder of Lady Nana Diversity Dance Company. Raven is a Black widow from Basket, is a Tanzanian two-spirit queer and transcendent empowerment storyteller. Raven is an abolitionist and co-founder of Lady Nana Diversity Dance Company. She is Canadian best-selling author, one of the top 25 women of influence in Canada, and co-founder of Black Lives Matter Canada. She serves as the steering team of the Black Lives Matter Toronto chapter, a group committed to eradicating all forms of anti-Black racism and to supporting Black healing and liberation of Black communities. Wings sings, whispers, and celebrates the legacies and histories that helped her find her voice. Sakofa, Harriet Tubman, Jackie Shen. All these abolitionists, weaving together centuries of old traditional struggles with those of today. She calls for us to reclaim land, body, connection, radical love, and interdependence. Everybody, welcome Reverend Wings.
My name is Reverend Wings. I grew up on the island of Bermuda, and so a lot of my perspectives and experiences have been shaped by growing up on a 24-mile long island with a population of 6% Black folks, 40% of a mixture of white, Filipino, Japanese, and South Asian folks. And I also went to high school in Atlanta, Georgia, which really was formative in shaping my politics and the ways in which I had to navigate safety from a very young age. I've been living here in East Toronto, Toronto, for those of you who know it by that name, for about 20 years now. First coming here to dance and to build a life for myself that I had dreamed about when I was younger. And over the past 20 years, I've been a part of and created many different collectives and groups, all of which had the aim of seeing ourselves as human on stage, being fully ourselves in the way that we express our truths, our values, and our histories. And so I had a felt experience, a bodily experience of liberation long before I started organizing for Black liberation. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of that background before I go into what I want to share with you today. So, good morning. Happy Pride, everyone. Today will be the Trans March here in Toronto, and I'm really excited to march with my kin this evening here at these lands, which are stewarded and protected by the Haudenosaunee, the Windback peoples, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Métis, and I myself am a Mohawk grandchild. And so a lot of what I do in my work is abolitionist storytelling. I venerate stories of the past, bringing them into a contemporary space for us to really get critical about the ways in which we strategize care in our communities. celebrate our lives as trans people and strength of communities coming together to learn from one another. Today I will speak about safety for trans people, but before I go into that, I want to invite you in this moment to take a moment to acknowledge your own body in this space, in this time, this vessel that you have been tasked with taking care of. We want safety in a felt sense, not as a fantasy or faulty promise, but as a practice of our inner collective community. And what better way to start than with ourselves, right? And so we're going to do this by taking some deep and intentional breaths that I will lead you through. Because it can be difficult to focus on our bodies, all have different relationships, relationship journeys to them. But I also encourage this as a practice for you to bring some love into yourself, into your listening self, into your self of witnessing today, so that we can also identify what safety feels like in our bodies, so that we can advocate for the conditions that make that safety possible outside of ourselves. So let us begin. I'm going to ask you first to think about 4 directions. There are many directions. We'll focus on 4. North, south, east, and west. We'll start with south. So in the south, I think of, and I want you to think of where you come from, the histories and the stories lead up to this reality. It can be very immediate. It can be, you left home today kind of thing. But you're breathing some generosity, and you're breathing some appreciation for this history, your ancestors, this space of rootedness. So in the south, we're going to focus on that. And we're going to take 3 solid, deep, long breaths to allow ourselves to feel that and to ground into that sense of history. So let's take a deep breath in, and a long breath out. Again, we'll take a deep breath in, and a long breath out. I know that you're in space with each other right now, and breathing is a very political act these days. But I do want to encourage you to allow your chest to move, allow your ribs to expand as you breathe. So put some focus in those spaces as we continue. One more breath for us out. Deep breath in, and long breath out. Beautiful. This time, thinking of the north, we're going to roll our shoulders a little bit. Give ourselves a little bit of a massage in the body. It can be slow, it can be one at a time, really your own pace. Doesn't have to be very big. So the north is where you're going, your intention for today, and your time together. So breathe some intention on what you're hoping for, whether it's to learn, whether it's to share, and be a witness to some change today. So breathe into the north, deep breath in, and roll back. Beautiful. One more deep breath from the north, and release. Lovely. For the east, we're going to stand everything that we no longer need today. To the east, letting go of our fear of not having the right language, of not knowing what we could not have known. We're going to allow that to release, allow those tensions to leave our bodies in this moment. Take a deep breath in to the east and release. Beautiful. And for everything we want to take in, everything we want to receive today, openness, thinking about the wideness of your back, openness of your shoulders, thinking about relaxing and releasing the chin and neck space. If we need to do a little head nod to release it, you can do that as well. Deep breath in. And long breath out. Wonderful. Thank you. I always find that I am much more aware, able to take in when I have a little bit of time for my body and brain. So, I'll begin with a little bit of a poem about myself, just to bring you to that storyteller aspect, and then we'll continue. So, my life is an echo. It's vibration, full of almost there endings. The song is long, it's straight, full tight, and held on to. Like a kettle, like a kite tethered, soaring bird-like atop a ravine. Elders here washed in time and sea grass. My waves are sharp, my fins translucent. I am connected, I am connection. My sorrows weather, my joy ignites. I am love's reminder of freedom. My songs sing melodies, the sound of blue and hibiscus rose. I am earth reflection, a dark mirror, a smoked port. My words bruise, break, and destroy, remember, and transcend. I am condemned into a false freedom I walk way too freely in. But how lucky, treacherous, beautiful, and difficult it is to be the guardian of memory. Thank you so much for humoring me and taking that time for our bodies. I encourage you as I continue to speak to take those moments for yourself, to stretch, to release, to eat, whatever feels good for you in this moment. Holes made deep by time get filled with something. And that shape changes and changes and changes. So we must shape change. Write the poems, make the music, the memes, the infographics, the banners, engage in conversations, dream up the future, carve it, breathe life and honey into it. Because there is no neutral body from which our bodies deviate. Society has written deep into each strand of tissue of every living person on earth. What it writes into the heart, muscles of 5-star generals is distinct. And what it writes in the pancreatic tissue and intestinal tracts of Black single mothers in Detroit, of Mexicana migrants in Fresno, but no body stands outside the consequences of injustice and inequality. What our bodies require in order to thrive is what the world requires. If there's a map to get there, it can be found in the atlas of our skin and bone and blood, in the tracks of neurotransmitters and antibodies. That's a note from Aurora Morales. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit of story about myself, and then we're going to get into some talks about some safety. A little life I had to fight for, and the life I dreamed of when I was about 5 years old. I had always been ashamed of myself. I was taught to fear myself and to hide myself, essentially to lie about who I was. To make other people feel more comfortable, I was taught that I was inherently bad, and I had to prove my goodness. I never understood that as a young person. And I always had questions. I was a curious kid. I wanted to know how things worked, why things were the way they were. That curiosity has served me well in coalitions across the world. To get curious about what I don't know, what I haven't been aware of, and how to be in better relations with the people who I want to be connected to. I always ask myself questions like, why was it that I walked into the room and laughed at me? why are there boys' toys and girls' toys? Why do I have to let sports in these certain kinds of sports? These are some of the questions that would roll through my head. Because, children between the ages of 3 and 6 years old often give clear signs as to who they're going to be when they grow up. I was maybe 5 or 6 years old when I fell in love with color paint. I was sitting by myself in front of my mother's television set. The TV was gigantic. And I loved it because it felt like I was looking out at the world. Again, I grew up on a very small island, so the world was through this medium of television and movies. And I was watching Cinderella by myself. I was meant to aware that I was watching things by myself. But in this moment, for some reason, I was watching it by myself. There's a scene in the movie that I want to talk about, a couple of scenes in the movie that I want to talk about. But first, I'm going to talk about Cinderella and how she was working on a dress so that she could attend this ball. The dress had belonged to her mother. And at that stage, I had no idea what grief was and what grief work really looked like. But when I look back at that moment, here she was trying to make something beautiful of something that belonged to her mother. This kind of venerative way of using your traditional ways of knowing to present to the world. She didn't finish the dress, but she had started it and left it. And she made friends with some mice. And these mice were round. And of course, at that age, I didn't realize the racial dynamics within the film. But when I look at it now, I think of the ways in which Cinderella made them feel whole by giving them each an item of clothing. Kind of like a way to respect their I want to say humanity, but they're animals, so, a way to respect everywhere. And out of radical reciprocity, they reclaimed some items from her sister's room, her stepsister's room, and made the most beautiful dress. I remember seeing it on the screen and being like, oh, I love pink. That's my favorite color. Because I associated it with friendship and love and joy. And when she went upstairs in this dress that now she was finally appropriate enough to be seen in public in, her mother, her family, her stepmother, said, gave a little hint to the sisters about some items that she noticed that Cinderella was wearing. And the sisters stepped forward and ripped her dress apart. And I honestly, in the pit of my stomach, I didn't understand what was happening. I started to shake, and I was really, really confused. And I stood up. I was a 25-year-old. I stood up, wrapped my arms around the television set, and threw it down on the ground. And the glass shattered all over the carpet. This was the 80s, so we had carpet. And it was such a visceral experience. I can still feel the sensitivity welling up in me right now. But my mother came running upstairs, asked me what happened, what was wrong. And I told her, I said, Cinderella, she was trying to go to the ball, and she looked really pretty, and her friends, the mice, they could sing, and I was telling her all the stories, and her sister saying, Bridget, and I don't understand. I was so confused and crying uncontrollably, and I wasn't really known for throwing tantrums, so this was out of the norm for me. And my mother said to me, don't worry, it's okay, it's not real. And it's just make-believe. And so I said, well, why would they make that? When that story was told on Christmas holidays and just little things like that, it was told almost like how cute this moment where I had this throwing down some television set, where I really realized that my sensitivity showed up in me in such a big way, but I had to act on it. I had to do something about what I was experiencing as an injustice. And that behavior has followed me throughout my entire life. I was raised by a mother who was an educator, so it was really important to her for me to understand where I came from and the history and how we got to where we were. And so, but I mean, like at 10 years old, she took the Jim Crow laws in the South and she made them into like a little booklet. And she placed them down and asked me to write a book report. It was in the summer, it was in the school. And so, by 10 years old, I had a full kind of map of how we got to this place of in humanity with each other. I didn't have that language, but I was like, oh, so maybe the disparity between the colors of happening with light-skinned black people and dark-skinned black people was created so that we can be divided. Oh, that's not supposed to fit that anymore. So this is why I say I ask questions a lot. I'm so curious about why we react the way we react, why how society has shaped how we respond to harm. And this other piece that we'll get to later about safety and how we wait until something happens to react. A lot of what we do is reaction after the fact. And I think that it's important that we start getting preemptive about the ways that we create sex safety, which is why we're coming together today, and having these important conversations with each other. One of the things that I think about a lot is how something becomes a nightmare, how it becomes a horror story, or how a narrative gets created. As a trans person in this moment, and in many moments throughout history, we have been the scapegoat. We have been the nightmare, the thing that parents didn't want their children to become when they were older. And despite that, we're alive and we're here, and we find ways to thrive and build communities. But I just want to take a moment here to share with you some of the questions that I have around this curiosity of the nightmare. So I wrote, I wonder how something becomes a nightmare. I guess you have a thing or a person or a tale, and you story it into a seductive kind of truth. Something that may have some aspects of the truth, but not the truth outright. Then you get agents and actors to cast that spell of fear across oceans and airwaves until it lands on prominent floors in the United Kingdom and voted into law. But what if you are the nightmare? Not that you are evil or dangerous, but the nightmare is because you. Then you are the hunted, the barred and banned, discarded, wanted and desired, but only at night. How do I live in that freedom everyone always talks about? How do I live in the sun when it burns my skin? Tightroping survival because someone somewhere said I should burn. Trying to prove myself to people who don't know the land, the name of the land that's on. It's a ridiculous thing having to defend yourself against people who colonize the world with their disgusting and dangerous, violent imaginations. I was a child, hearing adults whispering over me with such toxicity, right? And fear. And I thought, oh, they were like, oh, this one's going to wind up on some tabletop somewhere, or this one's going to wind up in a dress somewhere. The worst things I could possibly do. I was 8 years old doing that. They would have preferred if I were an abusive narcissist with like lots of baby mamas and no kids. Like, the actual worst thing I could be was gay. You know, actually the worst thing I could be was a woman. That's really what it's about. This kind of, this patriarchal, misogynistic way that we shame femininity, the feminine, the divine, the woman, the archetype, right? And the mother. Usually the mother is the one we blame when we think about people create chaos in the world. And the fathers are the ones we celebrate for their absence. And these kinds of things I grew very tired of as a young person. You know, I asked my Bible school study teacher, I was like, hey, so the song that we sang just now, it kind of says, we are weak, but he is strong. I don't understand. If he made everything, why did he make us weak? What could make us strong? Because I think, like, my mother is strong. And she told me to answer me later, but never actually did, right? But these are the things that I was labeled as disrespectful for. Asking these questions that I was really, really kind of confused about. As I'm older now, and I'm in these different kinds of rooms, right? Where I'm the steward of the Black Lives Matter global movement, right? And so I've been in many different spaces, many different conversations about inclusion, right? How do we make space for people who have been historically, systemically erased or denied? And usually the focus is on inclusion. And so we built strategies and schools and programs for inclusion, right? Which can center a kind of assimilation. Right? It can center a kind of, how do we make ourselves okay enough in their eyes? How do we show our roots in order for people to take us seriously? Do I have to be harmed and show that harm physically for someone to say, oh my goodness, I should look at that? You know, Sonia Renee Taylor is a brilliant thought leader who I look to sometimes when I'm thinking through these pieces. And she talked about recently the fact that we as a society, especially as a Western society, we live in extremes. Extreme sports, extreme gymnastics. So when Black Lives Matter began in 2013 in the United States, 2014 here in Toronto, Vancouver, and Ottawa, we have a time here in Canada having to prove that anti-Black racism was systemic in policing first, and then expanded to all other kinds of spaces, from medical to all kinds of spaces, right? Because no data was collected. In the United States, they had some data going on, and not saying that it was perfect, but they weren't trying to scratch and it was a new word. So in 2014, when we said anti-Black racism, we didn't know what we're talking about, right? And what ended up happening through the stopping of traffic, through all the annoying things that we did to get attention, is a cultural shift happened. A cultural shift around language that we force for people to take seriously. Now, anti-Black racism is in almost every single school, conversations about this, every single program, every government person has to talk about it. Presidential elections across the world now have to take seriously this big piece. That's a cultural shift, right? And I think that, you know, when we're thinking about right now the trans peoples and the ways in which we are being attacked, quite frankly, from Uganda to Edmonton, Alberta, where y'all are, to right here to Sacramento. I know that there's this idea here in Toronto that it's just a better situation. No, they're just better at hiding it, right? Because there are more of us here, so it feels like, oh, there's more opportunities. People are safer. But what I have found in my experience, that is usually trans people who are keeping each other safe. It's usually us who are building the kinds of practices that create these dynamic spaces that you're in right now, right? The work that Adebayo is doing is incredible. Incredible, right? But he didn't have to do that, right? So we can both acknowledge that it's incredible work and that it's brilliant and that there is a whole lot of courage that goes into that. And the fact that some of us haven't been doing our share, right? Like safety is a collective responsibility. But we've been taught for generations to shuck it all off to the police. Now I know in the room may not all be abolitionists, but humor me for a moment. There's a really powerful story, a really powerful narrative that we all live with. And it's in our television shows, it's everywhere. It is this desire, this fantasy that we all have and hope for, and hey, I love it too, if I'm honest. And it is that in your scariest times, in the moments when you have the most fear, that you can call someone, an agency, a group of people, and they will come and make you safe. Right? This heroic sort of paradigm, right? And so then we have this idea that police are doing a lot more than they actually do. 80% of what the police focus on here in Sacramento is like medical emergencies, mental health emergencies, because people aren't acting characteristically normal in public, right? And these folks don't have the training to deal with it. They don't have the range and or the interest. Yesterday I was at a rally, right, where we were fighting against cops wanting to get back into schools in the TDSB. And we kicked them out 6-7 years ago because there was evidence, data, research collected on how these children were being groomed into prison systems. Right? How 6-year-olds were being arrested. 6-year-olds. Right? And these kind of things were happening in Black and brown communities here. And we got the trustees to come together, we got them out. And here comes the poor government trying to put money in their pockets by sending them back into these schools so we could be so trained. Question: would you ever allow a surgeon, a therapist, to offer you care with only 2 weeks of training? And yet, this is what we have kind of become accepted of for our children. Right? And so that's like the zoomed out perspective that we are all doing across, right? When we're thinking about history being taken out of libraries, when we're thinking about indigenous folks fighting Bill 5 and these treaties that are being broken, like all of this is actually connected, right? Transphobia is spiritual warfare, in my opinion. It is this act of fighting against people who know ourselves so well and have the courage to walk in that space. And throughout history, we have been the people in our communities who have been the guardians. In my Two-Spirit community, we are memory keepers, archivists. You know, it's important to remember what has happened. So a lot of my work is that, right? Reminding people of, hey, we've been here before. This is how we got out of that. This might not have been a great strategy, but this might be something that we can use. So when we're thinking about safety, right, we have to redefine the definition of what safety is, like what the collective understanding of safety is, and who is responsible for it. A lot of people think of prisons as this option, but we know that they don't really stop people from continuing to commit harm, right? They don't really create the conditions to address the behavior and to course correct so that there is reintegration into societies that is safer, right? But we have options and we have practices in our communities, especially in our disabled communities. Disabled and disordered communities have figured out ways throughout the year, because we had to create bubbles. A lot of us in COVID-19 early experience of it were met with the idea of having a bubble, a circle of people. Someone who was doing the grocery shopping, someone who was doing this part, and someone who was doing this part then. But that was a technology created by disabled and disordered folks who had to function that way, right? And so for trans people who are fighting for our lives, you have to have this like PhD knowledge of queer and trans history, right? They demand disclosure, even though they don't offer safety. They demand us to understand the sociological effects, the psychiatric, and even endocrinology, the study of bones. It is that deep when we are defending our own humanity. When we, as like not even 1%, our most populations are the ones who are being oppressed. So my right, when I ask these questions about how we become a nightmare, and how narratives shape our lived reality, our work as people who work in nonprofit sectors, our work as people who are creating these spaces, is to shift the narrative of trans people, of queer, of just anyone who exists outside of white Christian men. And even within the white male experience, there is nuance there that there's no space for in a society that we built. Right? And so we are facing these opportunities in front of us to follow some steps in how we do that. One way that I've been doing it with Black Lives Matter Canada is we realized that people were coming to rallies and coming to actions because they were looking for a felt sense of community. Right? Because at our rallies and our actions, we were singing, we were dancing, we were chanting, we were fighting for each other's lives, and we were keeping each other safe. For some of us, it was the first time we felt like people outside of our own immediate folks were looking out for us. And it became this kind of entanglement almost. Like the chaos was what was bringing us together. And we realized that was not going to be sustainable for very much longer. That we had to create some avenues for people to come together to learn from each other, to practice softness with each other and compassion, right? To understand how we are implicated in genocides all over the world, including this one. Right? And privilege doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be guilty. I don't think guilt is useful. Frankly, or guilt and shame, those aren't useful things as to transform behavior. But I do think privilege means that you use it. You use it to benefit the collective. I'm a trans woman, an Afro-Indigenous trans woman who people listen to all over the world. So my activity is to show up and to speak, and it's to be in relationship with people and make sure that I'm not the only person who is being heard. That's my job. It doesn't doesn't necessarily mean that my life is easy or safe, but it does mean that I have a platform that people pay attention to in some really specific ways, right? Where I have a family in Germany right now who reach out to me every now and then when they come up again. Some confusing journeys, right? So their child is trans and their parents are trying to do right by their child. And they come to me over here in my little pocket of overcoat. And so we sometimes think that the small is not whole. That what we're doing in our immediate spaces is not something that can transform across the world. And in my experience, that is not true. When I talked about the extreme, we also we fail a lot of things because they're not planned. Right? If 10 people show up, we fail. No, 10 people showed up. We have an opportunity there. Right? And so we have to attend to our relationships to scale so that we can really put our heads together and find some ways for which to hear each other. You know, so for me, it is inappropriate for me to just live in Edmonton and Alberta and spaces to tell you what is the safest thing to do. It's more important for you to create opportunities for the trans communities and trans people. It's not everyone's connected to a community. The trans people in the space that you're in to tell you. You know, which means that you have to make yourself a safe space. Sometimes people think of accessibility as what happens only when you're in a space. However, accessibility is how you get to a space and from it as well. Right? So when we're thinking about and thinking about inviting people in, when we're thinking about inclusion, that's not a bad thing. When we're thinking about inclusion, we have to think about what we're inviting people into and being honest about what isn't available. So for example, if you're like, okay, we don't know all the best ways to create safety and safer spaces for queer and trans people in our organization, right? We're going to invite these trans people into our organization and let them know, hey, you're going to be learning with me. So that they can consent to be learned with, right? Some people want to come when we figured it out, and some people are there to help you figure it out along the way. There are different kinds. So these are some of the things that you can do and think about for yourselves when you are trying to address this big topic of safety. I often say, start with yourself. I'm a dancer. As I said before, I came to Toronto to dance. And so a lot of the ways that I come into spaces is through movement. When I started doing speaking engagements at high schools and universities, I danced. I said, oh, we're going to sing a song, y'all. This is for my nerves. This is for my nervous system to just bring it into this space for me. And I would teach movement, like I did earlier today. I would just bring myself into the space. And then I'd be able to give them the historical facts of how things happened and how we got here and what we can do together. And what the work of Black Lives Matter is at that time, so was mostly what I was doing. And I found that that became so effective. People wanted less speeches and more like realistic conversation, right? We are in conversation with each other. It's not soapbox stuff. If I was in the room with you, I would be walking around, talking to you, sitting with you, you know, to create some of those spaces with each other. So what I'll leave you with is this. When you think about a time where you felt safest, what were the conditions that made that possible? That's the question. Because I often think of safety as an ecosystem. So the ecosystem that allows you to exist as your full being, for you to even discover it. Transit is a journey, right? And many people think of trans people as having like one destination, and that's usually related to surgery. And that is one, and it's valid and beautiful. And then there are all kinds of different things, right? And people go backwards and forwards and find such fluidity in how they want to be in relationship to people. Often I find that trans people and non-binary people specifically don't even think about their gender unless they are in a conversation with someone and it comes up. Right? So when you're thinking about how you develop some systems of safety, start with yourself and go, okay, this is what I would need to feel safe. How do I ask for that? How do I create some friendships and connections around building out from a small group of 3 to a group of 10? And then beyond that, so that we can map out some pathways. And it's okay to make mistakes, to get it wrong, right? This is why it's a practice community, because we don't know. You know, anyone who thinks about becoming a gymnast or a dancer, in my case, you are doing the same move every single day for years in front of that mirror to get it correct. And because your body changes every single day, your muscles are ripping and changing and growing and swelling, and you have to find a way to hit that moment, right? And so what we're asking people to do is prepare for harm, prepare for safety, create the conditions for when harm happens, it can be taken care of, both for the person who's perpetrating and for the person who is the victim of it. So we can make space for humanity in the ways in which we deal with each other. And those are just some of my thoughts. Thanks for listening.
In 1981, we had morality police here in Edmonton that actually raided and actually arrested people. And from that perspective, we were talking about, as well, we had another article here around how groups had to come together in order to march in Toronto and be safe. And one of the other articles was talking about how even though that there's been lots of issues, we continue to fight change and move forward because there's still, we see in the 1800s, people who have been arrested, but today we still have these laws on the books that help us progress forward, and even though it's a long battle, we have made small strides and continuing to work together, and there's lots of great examples around the table. Yes? Yeah.
When did they have that federal law again decriminalizing?
So in '67, there was a bill presented to reform the criminal code to around social issues such as homosexuality, abortion, and contraception. And then officially in '68, homosexuality was decriminalized, and in '69, Canada, because of all of the amendments take a while, it was officially on the books as decriminalized. So it was like a 2-year process to get the criminal code changed and actually passed, where I was sent through, well, it would have been England at that time, not Canada, because we still had the repatriated constitution.
Yeah, I think in terms of like the bureaucracy that was involved in terms of like that quote unquote 2-year process, right? Because not long after that, in 1981, when Pisces Health Spa happened, the Pisces Health bathrooms happened, it's like if they have Stonewall in New York, we have the Pisces Health Spa in Edmonton. And I think that it is important for us to ground ourselves in that, in the sense of there's a lot of like helplessness right now in the community, what can we do? But if we really put that ground that concretely, this is within someone's lifetime. someone was there who witnessed everything that day. Someone who, what, they're like 40, so I can calculate the math, but I think something important to highlight is that someone infiltrated from the morality control unit, as they called it, infiltrated and then framed people to say that, oh, they performed acts of fellation and anal intercourse between males. And then here they also say that there was no evidence to suggest prostitutes were working in the spot. That goes hand in hand with what happened in Stonewall. Who was it on the streets that was fighting? Was it not sex workers? And I think that if the Pisces House Law happened today in Edmonton, who would they be reading? They can't tell you it's illegal to be gay because of immorality, but then they'll tell you if you're working under the table, if you're a sex worker, they'll still get at you for it. And I think it's important to say that, because Somi and I were talking earlier, like AUP is good friends with Migrante. There's a lot of people in the AUPE that aren't migrants, but yet they show up concretely and show material support and are there for migrants. There's queer and trans people in all of our organizations, you know, in our workplaces, in the streets, in indigenous, like all across the board. But it's like, I have a lot more in common with someone who is straight and has showed up concretely to push policy for queer and trans rights than a gay cop who will pin my people down when push comes to shove.
And on top of that, one of the articles talked about the intersectionality that we often forget about, that sometimes we get pigeonholed into having to identify as one section, but we may be several different things, and as a result, we need to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, one last point. I'll stop
No,
yapping now.
we have to, don't worry, we're
It's
waiting for
like-
lunch, no worries.
Sorry to bring it to light, but I think it's important for talking history today, is that when Pride was stopped years ago, who were the people that had issues with that? Who were the ones benefiting from the fact that it kept going? Who were the people on the ground saying, you need to pay attention to this, and these people weren't listening because they want to keep the party going. And so like when we say that Pride is a protest, it's not to take away from the fact that we've had our wins and successes. It is more important now than ever to honor those wins and successes so that we keep that momentum going, right? So across that, it's like people showing up, like the nurses, for all of these youth that are losing access to education. It's the migrants across the border. It's black people facing police brutality in the streets. Same thing with indigenous people. And I think it's establishing that basis of unity, and for us, not just like as a community being like, what's next for us, but also like how can we also show up across the board for other people that may or may not share those identities. I think that like if we organize this thing, it has to go beyond what you might imagine is possible to do.
What law enforcement did, this morality kind of policing, the law that they used to attack queer and trans people was public indecency. That's what they would charge people with. So while homosexuality was decriminalized, it was decriminalized in your private bedroom that you had to hide and still be closeted. And they used public indecency to do bathhouse raids, to attack people in the street if they, like even if two queer people held hands, they would call that public indecency. And that law still is in the criminal code, and it's not defined. So law enforcement can interpret public indecency however they choose. And when we have current governments that are emboldened to attack people, we need to be aware of that history. And I know everyone in the room is. So, but it's just that when I learned that, it just really stuck with me. And that the way that laws can be changed, but then they just find another way to subvert and attack.
A piece of a country, maybe some of you have never been in, right? A country that this is not history, this is reality, right? People can't hold hands in the streets. People are attacked, anytime. Some of us are displaced, right? Forced into asylum seeking, right? To find safety, right? So this piece is reality, right? And what I'm just to echo about, we talked about something which is so hot, so I think when you go into it, everyone is going to get involved. But I wanted to talk about the piece that I saw here about relationship, right? How dating in those days, how it was illegal and, punishable by penalty. I want you to reflect, this is reality and it's still reality here, right? It's just a different layer of it or how people see it. But trans people, specifically, trans and non-binary people, we have people that we find on dates or someone we meet and they're like, you date, we talk with this individual, right? Maybe for a month or two, and then after they're like, you know what? My parents will not approve me to be in a relationship with a trans person, right? So that is not different from this. That's not different from this. If we have our own communities really pushing aside to build relationships, but building relationship with us, right? That means they see us differently, right? We can't be something someone wants us to be. We are our authentic self, and that really threatens the world. I don't know how, but it does threaten the world in so many different ways. But coming back to what was out on the table here, it was about the 2024 anti-gun.
It's that we started talking about the Amendment Act, like you mentioned, in the Education Act. So I'm sure many of you know about Bill 27, Bill 29, that's currently well, it starts September 1st. So I had shared with them, the reason I grabbed this one is I'm currently required to build policy around using masks. That's what I have to use this entire summer. And we just discussed really how profound the impact is obviously on the transgender community, non-binary community, but also all other communities, because those children now are going to have to change relationship with each other within the building and with their teachers, support staff, because they fear, potentially being outed or they're in essence just taking away any form of safety that we've created over this last period of time and just completely annihilated it. But I also shared that what's disturbing is that a lot of people that I've spoken to are more worried, interestingly, about the reaction of cisgender individuals who have to report that their child is a female. That's the only requirement, is that to play sport. Myself as a mother have to indicate that if my child wants to play on a volleyball team, a female volleyball team, I have to indicate that my child is actually a female. And if anyone challenges me, I have to produce documentation, that medical documentation, not just birth certificate, indicating that the child is actually female, which is horrible. But I find it so interesting that people are just so appalled by that. And they almost forget about the other, which basically is the start of the essence and the crux of the whole problem, is to dismantle the beginning transgender and non-binary community. But they only focus on that aspect, that we're going to have the average family angry with us because we have to indicate that their daughter is female. So, we just kind of talked about that and how we can support. My role is to support staff. And I was sharing with them that 99.9% of the educators in Alberta are completely contrary to this amendment. And so now that we have to support not only the students, but we have to support the families, and we have to support the staff who work with these individuals. How are we going to do that while they're all in the middle of this cacophony of disaster?
We did also echo that it is a human rights issue, right? Humanity, right? Okay.
So they can't hear me. Sorry, interrupting.
Like, it is a human rights issue, right? Also, students, if you cannot really learn in fear, and that is what is happening here. And what that also takes a toll on a trans youth, right? In different various ways, right? Those who are outside of that experience do not really seem to understand it. But being outed or trans youth being outed, it's like you are literally murdering me. We remember every year 400 plus trans people who are being unlived, right? Who are being murdered by our own families, by our own relatives, by police, by people who are very transphobes, by all these entities of sectors. So just that piece influences people who unlive trans people to continue doing the same, right? It takes away the right of a child, of a youth to stand peacefully, safely. Me being myself does not take away from anything from anyone. A trans youth being a trans youth does not take away anything from anyone. And the government still we have high levels of houselessness happening. But it took them time to pass bills like this, right? We have so many people who are unemployed, but they go ahead and target the marginalized individuals. Why do they target the trans people? That is the question we need to all answer. Why are they targeting the trans people? Why is it during the liberation, it is still the trans women who stood up? It is now still the trans people who are fighting, and we are called dividers. We are being named, we are dividing the community, we are aggressors. Like, it's still the team, and yet organizations receive funding because of the trans people.
Okay, so what my thing was, the provincial government has like a Republican with great family values type thing, and so they prefer not to acknowledge the fact that there's new dynamics happening with, an accepting of people variances than what there used to be female, male, and that's all they know. So they're kind of choosing ignorance. That's why the more education I think we can bring about this topic at every level, everywhere, all the time, as often as possible, anyway, without overdoing it. But anyway, it can only help. And even like you were talking before about your parents maybe not accepting, relationship with transgender or something. Well, you know what? Unfortunately, we can't expect everyone to understand. That's why education is the only thing we can offer for them to try to understand and be a little bit more open-minded. That's my opinion.
Well, we'll kind of naturally transition to this table, so does anyone else feel called to speak here?
We also picked up the 2024, the Education Amendment Act that they were talking about. With our agency, recently to me as well, we work within the schools as well. But we work within Edmonton, St. Albert, Sherwood Park, the different districts. But a big issue that, as an agency, we're inclusive and we provide safe spaces for non-binary and trans youth, but we're coming into schools, specifically some Catholic schools that aren't inclusive. So we're in this space where we're providing a safe space and inclusive space for these kids and youth, but we're taking them into schools that might not be in that inclusive space. So it's kind of, as an agency, how do we navigate that? How do we come into a space that doesn't necessarily align with our values, but we're trying to create a space for the kids and youth that are there that need the space. But then at the same time, you're working as an agency with partners and trying to maintain partnerships, but also following these acts and these laws that they're trying to implement. So what we chatted about was just kind of, where do you have that fine line of where you stand? How do you support these kids while also trying to educate them at the same time? If they do have questions about gender and sexual expression and sexual identity, but again, you're in a space that isn't allowing for them to have that conversation from the bigger school district. And then again, but we're trying to be in there to support these kids. So it's not only that, the safety for our kids and our youth, but the safety of our staff, if they're coming into these spaces that aren't inclusive, or you're having people that are telling you that you can't be educating these kids, you can't be talking about these things. But as an agency, we do talk about these things because that's important. It's important to us that we are asking what your pronouns are. How do you identify? It's in our application. It's the first thing we ask when we have talking to our volunteers, our youth, our children. How do you identify? That's how I'm going to talk to you about. But then I don't want to take you into a space that doesn't allow you to express yourself. But then it's just kind of a fine line of deciding where to be and like how do we maintain that? How do we move in without not demonizing, but villainizing another group of people that isn't allowing us to be who we need to be. So that's kind of like what we chatted about specifically with this as well. It's like, yeah, we ask for pronouns, we ask how you identify, but then saying, but just be careful because these people that we're taking you into might not allow that or have that conversation with us. And then we're trying, again, maintaining relationships with partners while also standing on our ground. Kind of like where we're at.
So how would Catholic, how would you respond to that, being as a representative of Catholic services?
I can only speak for our division. We don't do that.
Yeah.
We honor the fact that you're your own entity, and we have our our laws that we have to, these acts that we have to follow, and we try to comply as best we can without being non-compliant. But so in our division, when you said that, I was like, oh, I hope that's not one of our schools, because that's not the message we send to our administrators and to our teachers. In fact, I don't think they would align with us if we did. But from what I understand, legally speaking, if you're an entity working within the school, you're allowed to function within your own policies and regulations because you're really just utilizing space. You're not actually going in to teach children in the classroom setting, right? If you go in to teach, then this act will definitely come into play because now the government has to vet you before you go in to talk about those conversations in the classroom with the teacher. But up until now, up until September 1st, it wouldn't necessarily be a mismatch.
Like the example that we recently encountered was a teen we had a non-binary teen volunteer that was questioned by their mentee about why they were using different pronouns and were using a different name. The conversation came up. Our coordinator spoke with the little and just explained that some people just that's okay, and like some people don't identify within the binary and they use different names and that's okay. It led up to the school liaisons, and then it became an issue where they said that we were not allowed to have that conversation with the kid. So
In your space.
Well, the space is in the school.
In the school.
In the school.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so we're working within the school, so that again, it's an education piece too, where as an agency, it's like, if a child is asking me these questions, it was better for us to not just brush it under the rug and be like, oh, don't worry about it, but we feel like it's a responsibility to also educate the kids, especially if we're doing school-based programming. But then again, then the school decides, oh, you're not allowed to talk about these things.
And you know what? It's not. To be honest with you, it's not a ideological response. It's more of a, again, legalities. Because teachers are only allowed to teach what's in the curriculum, and we're not allowed to bring in our own bias, right, or our own ideology. Although it's reaped with ideology, that's a different story altogether. But so yeah, in that case, yes, it's true, because what happens is that's connected to sexuality. And the curriculum only allows you to speak to, and this is Catholic or non-Catholic, sexuality at certain ages, with certain topics. So that might be why they said to you, you can't have that conversation, because no one in the school is allowed to. Because anytime you speak about sexuality or anything related to it, parents have to know, and they have to sign a form saying that they're okay with that conversation, regardless of whether it's that topic or just, this is my body. My parts.
Yeah. We kind of have an opt-in system now. Sorry, I know there's comments, but I want to make sure this table has a chance, and hopefully we can come back to that at the end. So this table, do you have anything you want to share?
So, kind of talking about like story, and then specifically history, like we all kind of pulled things regarding, I think history that maybe is not always well known. We don't always, you almost need to go looking to learn about these things unless you've kind of been living it, and how the way that the history maybe is suppressed, we try to hide certain things like I grabbed this about the attempt to purge queer and trans people from government work and military, police, etc. And how all of that, like, you know, ties into like the fruit machine and all of that stuff. Which if you haven't heard of that, you should look it up. But you know, that's something that gets suppressed. We don't talk about it, and we want to talk about how good Canada is, how we like legalize, same-sex marriage faster than the States, and da-da-da-da-da. We want to present as this like positive entity, but then we don't want to talk about the true history of persecution and things that happen. And so that's kind of one of our big through lines about our conversation here. Am I missing?
Yeah, nailed it. That's exactly.
Yeah, and then we also like connected it directly to like this is a table I think of a lot of social work folks over here. So kind of pertaining specifically to social work and nonprofit and how not acknowledging or knowing or sharing like history and the stories of what has happened, how that impacts the work that we're able to do.
So I moved to this country like in 2010 from the Philippines, where most education has been privatized. You need to pay in order to have a decent education. And that's why a lot of people have to migrate out of the country. That's also why I had to move here. Because there was a certain point my parents said, we can't afford that anymore, just move to Canada, where it's public education is good at the time. Now, where I went was actually an all-girls Catholic school at the time. It literally said word forward in the rule book, no girl-to-girl relationships. Do we think that stopped people from exploring? Do we think that stopped you? Like, people build social credibility in the sense that if they can serenade whoever they like in the high school building without the teachers looking, you get props. It's in whether you're queer or not, it's someone folding a love letter in a heart and then passing it until it gets to the other side of the classroom. And then everyone watches for the reaction as to how they respond. I think that in our schools and for these youth, they deserve to be children, they deserve to be kids. What does that mean? The same way that they talk about they deserve the chance to explore their hobbies, whether that be sports, is it language, is it band. They deserve the right to explore their identities. Where I came from in that school, there were people that were also exploring their identities. They were like, maybe I'm bi, maybe I'm not. And then after that, whether they decide they are or they're not, they figured out that, hey, I got a chance to explore it. Next thing you know, they're showing up in solidarity because in Manila, they just held the Stonewall rally like yesterday, the day before that. I think in the context of our province in our city, and like with Migrants, when we were talking about campaigns, that one of them is the Education for All. If you want to hear more about that, feel free to hit me up later. But for these kids that have lost access to school because their parents have gone undocumented, not only are they thinking about that, they're thinking, hey, if I decide to explore my sexuality, I can't really do that because of this new bill. And I think the bigger question we need to ask too is, and I like to throw this question at people who might not know much about it or against it, is why are these people wasting taxpayer money?
Yeah.
Why are they wasting taxpayer money doing all this? What are they actually distracting us from?
Exactly.
What? From the fact that they are privatizing education, they are privatizing healthcare. Who accesses education and healthcare? Is it not queer and trans people? Is it not also straight people? Is it not the migrant youth that is saying at home, I'm not gay, I believe in God, I believe in X, Y, Z, but then they go to school, they look around a little bit. Then they hear about this bill and they're like, okay, maybe I'm not gay, I can't be gay. It's about the kid that can't come out at home because of their housing, because of access to food, and say, I can't be gay because I need my housing, I need my community. If I say I'm gay, it means that I'm gonna lose all of that and I'll be on the streets. So I think it's for the ones that are queer and trans, but also let these be kids, let them have access to education. And also, why is our taxpayer money going there when it should be going towards actually serving the people? So I think that's an important point, I guess, that's been brought up in other spaces I've been in. So thanks for listening.
I think that's something that we've talked a little bit about, especially when we've talked about the importance of comprehensive sexuality education specifically, and how much trans people threat the power because they exist outside of the binary that power is created in, that existing forms of power created in, right? It's, I don't know how to put this. It's like the foundational piece is that binary, and that's where all sorts of like power structures are built from. And so when you limit people's access to education, you limit all these sorts of things like from them. I really want us to focus, kind of lead on those pieces. And the way I want to kind of just briefly connect it to what we did earlier today is like we listed all of these different services, right? That are supposed to be accessible to trans, to non-binary, to queer, to gender diverse people. But how do we know, right? Some of these are very explicit. How does a person who's looking for a service, who needs help, how do they know it's actually safe for them, right? So I just kind of want to maybe look at the services that we have here today. Think about like that piece of like, how do we actually know that it's safe? How do we create that piece of people, let people know that it's safe?
My name is Victor Mukasa. Very, very honored to be here yet another year, and congratulations to the community and amount of managing this year as well. I am based in Baltimore, Maryland, in the US, but originally from Uganda. Trans man, trans guy, 25 and 15, a very proud trans guy, and a human rights defender, continuously fighting to get back the space that has been taken away from people like me. I am a leader on both the continent and also here in the diaspora, using the platform, the Victor Mukasa Foundation, Legacy Foundation, that I am dedicated to amplifying the voices of trans Africans and queer refugees in Africa and in the diaspora. So this forum, is the right place for me to be, given the kind of work that I do, connecting with activists and human rights defenders in Canada. I'm very happy to be, in touch with Radica now, and very grateful for the support that you have given our siblings in various ways over the years. I will stop there for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victor. Mama Snow.
Hi everyone, my name is Anita Namasole, or Seguma Stephen Anita on my social media. I'm trans woman from Uganda. Now I'm here in Canada, Toronto, Carrier Street, but I was on to, I imagine it's not perfect, well, I was on to request it sometimes to translate my principle at the time of giving me to raise my issues. I was to justify that to complete for you guys. I'm here in Toronto. I was from Uganda. I'm trans woman. I'm trans woman activist for trans person here in Canada and Africa at large. Thank you.
You are most welcome, Mama Snow. Reverend, we already had your intro. So we're going to go straight to the first question, It's more of what experiences have you, what are some of the experiences you have experienced as activists, as human rights defenders, but above all as trans individuals. I think often the time we forget that we are part of the community that we are supporting. So I'm curious to hear from you about that. Maybe we'll take 2 minutes for this, and I'm gonna start with you, Reverend.
Alright, hello everyone. I'm in conversation with you, Victor, Anita, and Adebayo. What are some of my experiences as an activist here in Toronto. So I'm a performer of Black Lives Matter in Canada, and so a lot of my work has been around Black justice movements and solidarity movements within Indigenous communities here as well. Some of the experiences that I've had, particularly organizing for Black Lives Matter, is a lot of folks don't assume or think that a person with my experience is a leader in the movement. And so I often come up against the assumptions that people have around what is possible for trans people to be able to do in terms of leadership. A lot of what I used to focus on at the beginning of my time at BLM was sitting with families. I do harm reduction, and so a lot of what I was doing was the conversations with families after extremely horrifying experiences that they've had with the police mostly. And I would let them know what BLM can offer to them, both from a media platform perspective and also support sort of behind the scenes. And what would often happen is I would sort of walk into someone's home or wherever we were meeting, and there would be this immediate shock of didn't expect to see you. But because they knew that I was with BLM, just a certain amount of respect that they had to have because I was there to help. And eventually, once they got to know me and once they got more comfortable, it was sort of easy to flow. But that initial moment is always quite scary. Not because people are inherently scary, but you never know if they were going to react to you. And these are both very vulnerable people, very vulnerable states. And so, yeah, the that we've had to develop on our team to go out into certain spaces and to have these conversations has been really important. Making sure that we have exit strategies, making sure that we have people on the team who are not trans, who can buffer from time to time. These things are some of the things that are really helpful. But I do think that trans people being in the center of what we need is important. And a major shift. Like 10 years ago, there were lots of conversations about trans people never actually being in the room, never being consulted on what our needs actually were. And a lot of people trying to diagnose us and our issues without really consulting us at all. There has been a major shift in that, but we still have a long way to go in legislature and policies that are happening across the world now.
Yes, I really agree with you. You still have a long way to go. I'm gonna go to you, Anita. What does trans inclusion look like? You can actually osobola okuddamu ekibuzo kyoyagala okuddamu. So osobola okusharing ensonga zo, ensonga gyoyagala okwanja. Weba eri related to gwe nga gwe ng'omuntu okuincluding aba trans people wekirabika kitya gy'oli owulira otya nga abantu bakuincluding ekibuzo ndozana kigezezaako wekikuddiramu obulungi okitegedde
Okuludinga.
I'll help with that.
nyambaako.
Yeah, Anita, babuuza era emboozi eri wano ekwatagana n'embeera ey'okulaba nti buli kye tukola nga community ey'abaqueers nti ddala okulaba nti trans tuliyo ebya ddala oba tetuliyo ebya ddala. Era ebigambo ebyo erimu ebirowoozo birowoozaako kigezo okusharinga n'abantu bano. Abantu bagamba okukola kuba trans ekibiina ky'abasiyazi bonna olaba nga trans nebanyi ddala ddala oba yaswakana. Kati ayagala oyogere ku ekyo bw'oba osobola okukozesa n'ebiva mu experience yo mu nga trans woman, nga trans activist, nga trans person in communities zaffe.
Ngenda kutandikira wano munze kyendaba
What I see.
kusaawa zinzigenda mu maaso as trans person, trans community efimiddemu tetulinawo trans community oba betongole beetaba trans woman oba beetaba siyaza abaddala nti batuufu.
So yes, so I want you to give me a chance to interpret, right? So Anita is saying one of the most issues that is faced by the trans community, trans refugees, is we don't have organizations that bring trans people who identify as trans people in Canada, yet they are still in refugee camps made in safety.
Kubanga nze ndabye abantu abeeyita trans nga tekibali ba trans.
Yes, right there. Wait, Anita, yes, so she said that she has seen people who say they identify as trans, but when they're exploiting trans people.
Ndabye abantu abajja wano mu Canada nga bayitira ebitongole ebireeta abantu nti either abasigazi aba trans woman, trans man, naye nga baleeta abantu abali batuufu ate bajja wano mu Canada ate tukolako homophobia, transphobia kugamba
Okay, Anita, I want you, njagala opakadde nvunule byoyogera, right? So, she's saying she has seen people who have come here, organizations have brought people here as 2S LGBTQ, as trans people specifically, right, in Canada, but they are not trans, and also they portray, they become transphobic and homophobic to the trans people. So that's the message. You get it? Yeah, it's deep. Go ahead, Anita, finish up.
It's kyali baddawo nti no opakala bakulese naye ng'oli musiyasi naye nga tebakigwamu kati netwebuuza yino nga Canada erimu okuyingiza abantu abategetuddukidde ate leta abantu abagendera okutubalako obuzibu ekitegeera otugenda okufa tasoboka mu nyumba musula ajja kusoba mumune ajja kondya amalusu ajja kukola kino ekitegeera n'otukamera okwetera mu nyumba mwoli okuba kino tokyali safe munsi yolirowoozaako safe.
Yes. So Anita is saying why Canada is bringing people who are not LGBTQ that are making them feel so unsafe. They spit on her. They humiliate trans people, and yet they came in the name of being trans, being LGBTQ. Why is Canada bringing people like that to Canada? Yes. Government. Yes. Yes. Exactly. This is what she's doing. She's bringing awareness to it. Yeah, and I think, I like that, but I think it starts here where there are policymakers in this room, right? There are organization leaders in this room, right? There are people who have connection to people in power in this room, right? So I think it's such a beautiful space for us to know. Yeah. Anita. It's okay. What deals like Victor? You reach a time when you can't even leave your home, your house. And you want to unlive yourself.
Yes. And Singaza artist transwoman nze nsubidde mu Uganda amakumi awera nsubidde mu Temora amakumi abiri.
Yes, me as a trans woman in Uganda, I have been jailed in more than 14 prisons. Even in Nairobi, Kenya, in the refugee camps, I was in prison 2 times. You know what? These are experiences of trans people. So Anita says that she has experienced very dehumanizing experience of getting a stick, putting it in their behind, and they're wondering, they really came for safety in Canada, but still they're facing transphobia. Yes. Yes, so Anita is really begging, is asking if there is any organization or anyone in here to really fight that fraud of people who come here, who they bring here, organizations that bring here towards LGBTQ refugees, bring in people who are non-trans. When they come here, they start attacking trans people, they start being transphobic, homophobic to trans people. To add on what Anita is saying, I have experienced it too. I have worked in a decade, 10 years, in towards LGBTQ refugees and newcomers. But the truth is, there are some who come getting status as towards LGBTQ, but then be homophobic and transphobic. Let me be clear about my stance. We can't leave our homeland if they are safe. And neither, even if someone is LGBTQ or not, anyone who leaves their home to come here, it's because home is not safe, right? So people claim refuge using LGBTQ. Me, now this is a bit personal because Anita, you've just shared that and it's a hot piece and I've been whispering, I continue to whisper in stuff, John Humphrey stuff so much, I'm telling you, whenever I get one, right? That we have people who have get status as LGBTQ and then they be transphobic on us, they be homophobic on us right here. They use social media, they use different communities to isolate us. We would not have an issue if they were not homophobic, if we are not transphobic. And this is the point Anita is bringing home, right? It's similar point. So and that brings me to vetting. Does organizations who work with LGBTQ communities vet these individuals? Just a question for you to chew on. Victor, to you.
Yes, thank you very much. That's all deep stuff that we just heard from both Brevin and Anita. And it's very representative of some of the feelings that I have. And for me, of course, my activism has been shaped by initial exclusion. You know, exclusion is what led me to resist, led me to stand up, wait to close to 3 decades ago in Uganda. And it continues to be the fact that I wake up to every morning as, you know, as an individual and also for my communities, wherever I am. Now, exclusion, the fact that we sit, because this is not a meeting of farmers talking about how to develop, better crops in the future or stuff like that. I believe this is a human rights space, and it is very disheartening for me that we still talk about inclusion in human rights spaces. That it is a topic for us to unpack. I find it weird, and it makes me question whether we are performing in our work, just performing, doing some kind of performance or not. Should exclusion be even an issue to debate when it comes to human rights spaces? Now, as trans man, trans dad, trans activists who bled everything for the movement in Uganda, for example, with the Family for First organizations, and leading that movement for years before I fled. I am representative for so many movement pieces in Africa, for example, that were started by trans people, and yet trans people today are erased out of the history of this movement, not only in Africa, elsewhere. Trans people today, we are in the Pride period, Pride month of June, July. You see that their Pride parades were trans, the mothers, our sisters, our mothers, those who are the beginning of Pride. I don't even acknowledge, how will the current ones be acknowledged? How can they be trans Pride marches across the world without the presence and inclusion, as the active inclusion, not for optics, not for performance, but active inclusion of transgender people in those crowds, in those speeches, in those human rights events that happen prior to Pride Parade. There's so many places. I was International Grand Marshal of Pride Toronto 16 years ago. And it is the first year that Pride Toronto had a trans march. And that was a shock for me. That for the first time, and all trans people were celebrating. We have an International Grand Marshal who is a trans finally, and we are going to have our first trans march. I was so shocked that that was even a huge celebration. That how can Pride be celebrated for all those years of Pride Toronto without a trans march? Where you have a dive match, you have any kind of match you want to bring up will happen. So I feel that exclusion is our fight. And exclusion, when it comes to, when it comes to the LGBTIQ and two-spirit, respecting the terminology in Canada, it's a big fight for all of us. And yet, trans people are at the margins of that fight. We claim as LGBTIQ people plus are menus on the table, but indeed we are even on the menu or queer tables, queer dining tables. We end up being on that menu.
And yet, organizations receive funding because of trans people.
Yes, and that is from history. That the team was a decoration and to bring about acceptance of a proposal from an organization that reported team. And it was only a team. But even to date, that is the story. When you look at housing in New York, I was talking to somebody, there's not enough, or just even slightly enough housing for young trans people. It's safe housing, just targeting that community. It's just like a Bible that we have a small house here, a small house there, when these people are actually the face of what homophones and transphobes are attacking. And I think it is time for organizations, for pride event organizers, for community leaders, looks different from what it is today. That inclusion involves having trans people speak for themselves. That inclusion involves having trans people visible and
stood up at some point and stood for all of us. So we cannot kill that. That is why the trans people are resisting. We are rising. We are saying no more backing for nothing. We are saying no more backing and giving out stories to be added in popular books for nothing. It is time for us to seek employment and be hard when we are seeking employment, and not just to get to the statistics of so many trans people did not get employment. It is time to see the queer community rising up in arms whenever there is an attack on the trans person. Because you know what? The trans person is the face of our struggle. It is the face of our struggle, and that is whether we like it or not. When laws are being legislated in Africa, they are legislated for transgender people.
Even here.
They don't have the technology.
Yes. You have a question?
When the laws are brought out and put into action, it is transgender people who are seen from a distance that are arrested. And I think that we need to rethink what inclusion looks like in the queer community across the world. And I thank you so much, Marika, for making this a topic for us to unpack here. I will stop here for now and then can say more with some kind of directed questions, because I might get to where I'm not supposed to be getting.
I like you to get where you are, wherever you go. Yeah. You have a question? Yes, because actually they are interconnected, right? Everything is connected. So what is happening in America, what is happening in Uganda is happening here. Just what Victor mentioned, here we all know the anti-trans legislation, right? It is also happening in the US. Similar laws are happening in because we are human beings, that's why we care. Yeah, we are. Okay, so we are going to the next question. Thank you for that. So, what would be a call to action for non-for-profit? Reverend, I'm going to start with you. And I think on this part, feel free to really share some issues, because this is the final question. Some issues you have experienced, some issues you have seen in non-for-profit sectors, especially non-for-profit that supports, that our communities are. It's called the illusion of inclusion. Yes. That.
Sorry, before you continue, Reverend, Chris, do you mind interpreting that for Anita so she can also organize her, thoughts before she speaks, as Reverend speaks?
Yes, Anita, ekibuzo kyembuuzizza kigamba nti biki bye wandiyagadde okulaba nga bibaawo mu bitongole byaffe bye tukoleramu. So, Reverend, to you.
Awesome, thanks. Cool. Okay, so non-profit business I find are having sites of some of the most extreme transphobia I found. They're the ones that have the policies, that have the conversations and the meetings and the including seminars, but like we find that in my experience and experience of some of my other friends, that they are constantly dehumanized in trying to access support, i.e. like human resources, for example, and how some of those policies are supposed to perform for people who are experiencing discrimination you know, a lot of people don't recognize how much we go through as trans people. People, and it's not particularly, and how is this process? For myself, for example, I'll give an example. I'm invited into a lot of spaces, a lot of not-for-profit spaces, a lot of universities, a lot of spaces. And often I'm the only trans person in the space. And what I will ask is, as soon as I arrive, hello everyone, my name is David Williams. Can I ask you a question? Which bathroom can I use?
Yeah.
And often, no one knows what to say.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next thing I say is, so then how can I be in public space if I can't use the public washroom?
Mm-hmm.
None of you can tell me which one I should use.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm invited in the space to talk to you about inclusion. And it hasn't even been thought about in how I am in the space today. And so then I can say, you know, I understand that these are things that you don't know. That these are things that you are learning, that you are growing into. And I'm making myself available for that learning. But that means that the next time I come, you must have a washroom for me and other trans people to use. Because I cannot be the only trans person in this space. I'm just the only one who was identified in front of you. Lots of trans people, non-binary people, and queer people, for that matter, know it's unsafe to come out. There aren't actual, like, there are a lot of people who don't feel like work is a place where they can be completely themselves. And I think that when people consider trans people saying, oh, we want to be ourselves, they usually go to sex and deviance. Right, unfortunately, because of the larger stereotypes that are connected to us as a community. But in fact, we are often the victims of sexual hate crimes, right? And those are perpetrated by people who are never asked to show up a particular way, who are never asked to tone it down. There are all these particular ways in which we come into a space where we're already armed. We're already having to shelter ourselves away from the potential harm, right? And so this is my call to action is for every single person in this room to consider the spaces that you are in, all the spaces that you are in, publicly, and ask yourself, is this a space that a disabled person with a wheelchair can come into? Is this a space that a trans woman, a trans man who is and or isn't visibly trans, and will they be comfortable when they're here? It's not enough to say it's a safe space. That's not real. A safe space is practice community agreements, right? And so if there isn't a community agreement around how safety needs to come up, it's her job when something comes up to say, hey, this is this person's pronouns, these are mine. Can we go around and actually have everyone share their pronouns?
Just like you did here.
Yeah, it takes off the trans person to have to do all of that work and pull up and do their job. Right? This is similar to how black people do in spaces. So when you're black and trans specifically, there are high levels of anxiety, high levels of stress, and it becomes debilitating in a really specific way. And other trans people face this too, but specifically black folks, specifically refugees, have a hard experience, a much harder experience in accessing healthcare, accessing any and everything that we should be able to access for our dignity.
Thank you, Reverend, because now that really reminds me of, we do really need trans tables in your non-for-profits. We need dedicated trans tables, trans programming in all non-for-profits, especially non-for-profits that receive 2S LGBTQ funding. Yes, to you, Anita, Ngaudina, dakika mbili, teka wawa katikitiki. Dakika mbili, Anita. Anita, chichiche wandiyagadde okulaba mu bitongole ebikulembera ebitongole ebituwa services, ebitongole ebikulembera abantu, ebikulembera ebibiina by'abasiyazi, kiki kye wandiyagadde okulaba? Kiki kye wandiyagadde okulaba kibeewo? What I would like to see? To bring people who are real. So that trans women can be hired as well and can work. To have access to housing as well. If you are a trans woman or trans person, to go in a bathroom that you like without facing discrimination. Doctors, healthcare providers, to be okay with us, to be okay with who we are. Okay, now you know English doesn't have so many words, right? It's such a plain language. But Anita says to be, treated as a woman, she is. Meanwhile, trans women are women. So she doesn't want to be treated based on her body parts because she's not biologically female. She wants to be treated as a woman that she is. Yes. Okay, thank you, Anita. I think I'm coming to you right after I interpret. Anita says that organizations that are being funded by the government to bring towards LGBTQ refugees in Canada, they need to do research on individuals that they're bringing in the country. Also, she mentioned that here in Canada, trans people need to be empowered in all aspects, in all sectors, in all ways of their being. There is so much that has been taken away from us just by being who we are. So empowering us, you're not doing so much. You are literally doing what you're supposed to do. To you, Victor. Okay. One last thing. Yes. Yes.
của cái framework we need.
Okay. So Anita is saying the final thought, and Anita, I'm glad you brought that up because this is why we started the Ewaka housing. Anita is saying, you know, trans people are on streets, trans people are homeless, they are in shelters, and these shelters are not built. They're not built, created with them in mind, right? Within shelter systems, most of them get out of shelter and they're on streets. They get going to using drugs that are very unhealthy for their bodies. But because that is what is there, because that is very accessible. By the way, drugs are very accessible on our streets, and I don't know who brings them on our streets, but they're very accessible. So Anita, thank you for that, and this is why we started a Waka Housing Initiative, to provide housing for trans and Kuribai Park folks. Victor, to where can give us the last bit, the last one.
I'm ready for the submissions in terms of calls to action. I believe that the space that we are in today is a space for people who are working with trans people, or mostly the people here work with trans people, and in good faith, we want to be supportive of our trans communities. Well, for me, my cause I've tried to put it down in a very brief way because I might get very heated up and not stop. I just want to say that if you say you stand with trans people, and this is to NGOs and other organizers, including private event organizers and others, if you say you stand with trans people, this is the time to show it. And don't just include us. Showing it has a lot to do with
rainbow flags on the door.
Funding our work, funding our small initiatives, even big initiatives, and giving us a space at the table when you are called to advocate for resources for communities. That is how you actually include trans people. Don't just celebrate us, center us, don't just quote us. It is time for you to listen to us and follow our lead when it comes to trans issues. Hire trans people, in NGOs, hire trans people, pay trans people, put trans people in positions of power, not for optics, that they'll come and count and see how inclusive we are, but because we carry knowledge forged in fire. It has been created in us from our experiences that actually experiences of fire. Invest in translate projects, make space for us, not only at Pride Parades in June, but in policies, in your budgets, create that space in your decision-making room. Create space for trans people if you are being trans-inclusive. And here, these are some of the questions that as I started off with. If your pride has no trans presence, and by now you know what I mean by trans presence. If your pride has no trans presence, ask yourself why. If trans people are working for free in your organization or at small events that you make in your organization, ask yourself who that is benefiting. The answer is right there. We are not asking to be included in a system that exploits us. We are asking to be included in a system that is exactly the opposite of that. That is what inclusion means, that is what empowerment means, that is what working for dignity of everybody looks like. So if you truly want to honor pride, if you truly believe in trans inclusion, build with us. Work with us, walk with us, stand with us, and don't come empty-handed. Pay us.
Say it louder, I didn't hear the last one. Can you say it a bit louder?
The last piece?
Yes.
Because we've already paid with our lives.
They pay us, come on.
Now we
patience with the movement, human rights movement, but in case, certain things are missing and your definition of inclusion doesn't sound like what we have just unpacked today, I guess it is time for you to ask yourselves some of those questions. Who does it benefit? Is it benefiting my organization to be seen as an organization that is inclusive and taking care of everybody? Or is it actually benefiting trans people in my constituency?
Thank you so much, Victor. I want to take you into a short presentation because it takes us into Pride, it takes us into Trans March. I'm going to give you a brief background about it. So we did Pride engagement. When we heard about Pride coming back in Edmonton, and I want to make sure, D, if you feel called for to share something, yes, come on, share. Feel free. So, yeah, so Pride, we did a Pride engagement, right? And before the Pride engagement, we had a call that Pride Parade is coming back, but years back, there was humiliation, there was bullying, and they wanted to scapegoat that to bringing back Pride. And by the way, I want to say I'm not in opposing Pride, but I want to really make sure that trans voices, trans inclusion, curate by trans folks are intentionally included, involved in Pride. And next slide. Yes, so I want to say this quote, that it took many years of vomiting up all the filth I will be taught about myself, and I have believed before I was able to walk on earth, though I had a right to be here. So when Pride cancelled, when the Pride cancelled, Edmonton Pride Festival cancelled the Pride Parade in 2019, it happened when we protested against police participation. And the unleashed backlash really came from our community mostly. It came from the LGBT community. And that is very sickening. That instead of solidarity, we black trans people, cutie BIPOC folks, racialized folks, became scapegoats. We faced racism, internalized and systemic racism, transphobia, and a stark lack of transparency and accountability from festival organizing. I was threatened. I don't know, D, if you were threatened too, but I was threatened. I was threatened to be thrown in the bus. Why am I taking away pride from people? I'm not taking nobody's pride. I am being pride myself, So members of our communities were threatened, ostracized, told to go back where they come from. I was told to go back where I come from. That individual didn't know my story or my narrative. And support systems as blame for festivals cancellation. Yes, so Edmonton Pride Festival deployed police on black trans people. No, it's not good. It's very bad. It was very, very bad and very traumatizing. They deployed police on cutie BIPOC people, handcuffed people, refugees, and the very institution responsible for ongoing operation. Yet, the larger community, most of them failed to stand in defense of racialized community most at risk within the 12 LGBTQ movement. This betrayal cannot be ignored. Not today, not tomorrow, not yesterday. And it is rooted in racism, it is rooted in oppression, it is rooted in the systemic injustices and supremacy of whiteness when it comes to pride spaces. Yes, so this is what we did. I want to invite you here so you can say before I go I go deep.
Well, I wanted to say thank you for speaking on everything today. It was power to the evaluate queer and trans organizers. We are not victims of oppression. We are active participants in changing our history. So I want to say thank you as well for all the nonprofits who are here and us working together, because only us working together will change happen faster, better.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Dean. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So, that being said, we drafted a call to action as a way, right away when we heard that Pride Parade is coming back. And we shared that call to action with the Edmonton Pride Festival, but before receiving a response, I was ostracized. It was something that happened. I was humiliated. I was told that I'm dividing the LGBT community. I really also love that power somehow, but that is not what I was doing, you know? And I was labeled aggressive, you know? I can't be worked with, you know? But I'm not surprised if it was a white, gay man, all these things will not happen to them. And that's the reality. In Alberta, the government passed anti-trans legislation. This is attacking the trans community. It is not attacking the entire 2 LGBTQ members. I want to be specific. It is anti-transgender. It is not anti-gay. It is not anti-lesbian. It is not anti-bisexual. It is anti-transgender legislation. Next. So, we wrote our non-negotiables to Edmonton Pride Fest. And I said non-negotiable because I heard from my elders. I talked to my elders. I also whispered, I heard my ancestors whisper in my ears that some things are non-negotiable. My existence, especially in pride spaces, are non-negotiable, right? So part of it was to transform, part of it was to transform the Pride Parade into a trans march and acknowledge the urgent need for trans advocacy by rebranding the event as a trans march, centering trans voices and featuring speeches by prominent trans activists. We have trans activists in our country, in Alberta here, who are creating change, who are feeding families, who are creating workshops for y'all, who are doing the work, right? So the part was creating inclusive spaces for BIPOC trans individuals, like a trans liberation space, especially dedicated a safe space where BIPOC trans people can express themselves freely with access to food security, education materials, gender affirming activities, including discussions on gender affirming practices, and we're prepared to collaborate with Pride Festival. Now, the importance of such spaces is to reclaim pride to its roots, right? The other non-negotiable was to honor the history of pride and acknowledge the historical contribution of trans activists and their pivotal role in the pride movement through programming and recognizing at the pride stage in Alberta. The other one was no police or military presence in the trans march. Safety must be defined by the community, just like we had previously. You know, we have put trust in police to keep us safe, but many of our people are unfortunately by police, right? So we keep us safe. I'm gonna come to you. So we demanded a march free from police, military participation, because our liberation cannot wait. Our voices will not be silenced. We will march, we will build, we will demand. Next slide. The point about police, I know some issues come here and there about police in pride. There are bylaws that allow police to be on streets, right? During such big events, right? We are not against no bylaw. We do not want police to march in pride as an institution that has oppressed our communities. Yes, so in response to our list, they responded recently, and I'm so glad to share this with you. that renaming the parade, this I did not edit anything. And you are all the first people to see this. Reclaiming Pride, renaming the parade to Trans March, you know we legally cannot change that. We have explained this as it's tied to contract, grants, and other obligations. You remember the contract issue in 2018?
Yeah, it's not technicality.
Although
you can't be transmitted as technicality in this grant.
You know? Yeah. I can't have top surgery because there are no surgeons to do so, or the surgeons are limited.
Yeah, but this man has to take care of it.
Well, sis, I can't have my shirt off because I haven't had surgery, but cis men can have their shirts off. Eh? But me, I used to have my shirt off anyway. I used to. It did get me into trouble, but I used to. Yes, so we are already looking into getting a 200-foot-long trans flag to feature Pride. It might be the biggest trans flag in Canada. So I'm sharing this so you can reflect. So you can know when I'm being ostracized, when I'm being targeted, right? I'm not doing things for me. But before receiving this email, there was like 8 other paragraphs that none of you will read and say, what the hell? Excuse my French. Next slide. They agreed to some responses. They say creating a trans liberation space. We are fully on board, would love to collaborate. Honoring the history of Pride, we love the idea, let's make it happen. Now, I'm sharing this because I am tired of holding people accountable. You can also help me and hold people accountable, right? And hold Pride accountable as well, right? Next slide. They also say no police will march in Pride, police presence. That I already knew going public that there would not be officers marching. I did not know. I always see officers marching. Like such statements, these are statements I'm sending you, you know? And then that was the final comment as well. The final comment, of course, I told them that these demands are coming from Radical, but we're going to engage with community, and community might have more demands, right? So I'm just giving you an example. Next slide. Reclaiming Pride. Pride must be reclaimed to its roots, whether this is a new Edmonton Pride Festival, because that's what they were saying. There's a new Edmonton Pride Festival. They're not the one who called COPS in 2018. They're not part of it, right? But Pride is a space, whether it's a new leader or another leader. When we talk about trans inclusion, we mean trans inclusion. We mean transgender diverse inclusion in Pride spaces. If anyone wear those shoes, they're gonna wear all that comes with those shoes, right? Continuation of its past structures, it must be intentionally built by and for the community, reflecting the true legacy of Pride as a resistance movement. Pride is not a party. Pride is not a party, especially when we have our trans youth in schools that are being targeted, especially when we have our trans relatives that are being unalived. Yes, is that hand up?
Yes, can I ask you a question? Can we go back to the slide?
Last slide.
When they said EPS, RCMP, military will not be marching, is that only for marching? Does that mean there's still going to be cops there who won't be marching?
Those are questions that we need clarity too. You get what I'm saying?
So I think that's what I want to ask in terms of like presence. What do we mean by that? Is that the march itself? Or like you know that data that I sent you from the Stonewall thing, or like they're not marching, but they're there to their thing.
Yes.
And like let's know that we're everything, but
we expect that too.
Important.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for adding that. Yeah, next one. So we engage with community. Next slide. And these were the results. And feel free to take a screenshot of this and share. you have my consent. Because after this, I'm sending this to them as well, Edmonton Pride Festival, for transparency. You know? So a total of 60 responded to our survey we did. And 39 out of 60 support the trans march. 11 says parade, and 10 says both. Next slide. These are some of the comments, and I say this, I did not want to say this person said this, to really categorize, I wanted you to read from what people really say, right? These are not my words. These are community words. Without repairing damage done in the past and acknowledging the current political climate, a celebratory parade seems out of place. I agree that it should be a trans march to show our leaders that you need to protect trans people and youth, and the entire community stands behind that. The trans community is under attack, and we must center them in our fight for collective liberation. Multiple reasons. One says the lack of community consultation following the actions of 2018 parade dissolution. We need to actively repair community and not ignore past harm within our own spaces. To resist politicization and harm to queer BIPOC people and the largest queer and trans community. No cops. And the last one is really powerful because Edmonton Pride has not meaningfully addressed the harms caused in 2018-2019, and have continued to ignore trans and two-spirit community members. Actually, that's good. Yes, so it's the next one.
You want me to go next one? Okay. Are you missing
The bottom one.
It's being difficult. I'm just gonna get it back now.
Yes. So on offering tokenized in response to demands, the parade is a corporate event with police presence that centers cis white people and is completely disconnected from the roots of Pride as a political movement. We have not achieved equality and safety for all members of our community, so the time for partying isn't here yet. Now is the time to center trans community members and continue to fight for their equity and safety. This is especially relevant given the current government anti-trans legislation. A failure to set a trans march tells everyone that we accept these legislations as appropriate and facilitate further discrimination, violence, and anti-trans legislation. That was deep. That was deep. So these are some of the few comments of people who say they wanted Pride Parade. Why can't we have both? I think trans voices absolutely need to be heard and are important part of the community. That said, we need to show that we are vibrant, we are strong, and we are here. We can show that we are celebrating who we are as a community, that we are strong. I think perhaps having BIPOC trans communities as grand marshals of parade would show that we are all together on this, and that we're here. We hear you, we see you. As to police, I agree, the uniformed police and military is not the way to go. Yes, so streets are not safe when police are on, especially for BIPOC folks. I think it could be both. Someone said, have the biggest trans group. Everyone is important. Pride-rich history includes trans folks and our brothers and sisters and make up the rest of the community and have been solid allies. Pride for all should apply trans issues while not isolating us from the rest of the community. I think that is another issue that I wanted to talk about. Trans march is not inclusive of all to LGBT community. This one almost ate me up, but I had to keep my guard down. You know, how can a trans march not include all LGBT community? Is it me? but when I read that, something boosts in me. Because this is how they silence trans people. This is how they isolate trans people. This is how they take what belongs to us. By saying we trans people speaking or asking for our voice, using our voice to ask for spaces that includes us, that we don't include other LGBT community. You want to say
So I think like that piece too, kind of also had to calm myself down a bit when you said like that's because I think trying to understand it too from that person's perspective, there's like rapid misinformation that's going around right now that's also being propagated. But also to say that it's like trans march is not inclusive of all US LGBTQ plus community members. That's like saying people marching for Black Lives Matter and asking why there's no White Lives Matter. Sorry, my rough jokes, but in that sense too, you know, I think that highlighting as well, like the poor and like the working class queer and trans folk, because I remember back then, it wasn't just white people in the board, like there were like Asian folks that like were against. You good?
Yeah, it's just the blues.
Sorry. I'm like, very reflexive, like abnormal, but I'm like, every time I'm talking. But like, I think important to highlight, you know, like, there's a saying in the movement back home, they basically say, bakla ang lugar mo ay sa kakikibaka, which means, queer and trans folk, your place is to struggle in the movement. Also to highlight the fact that now is a time in terms of like solidarity, in terms of like propagating mass educations to people, why this matters, why is it that we center trans folk? And if they were to understand, who are the people that threw that, yeah, who are the people that threw the first brick, right? Like, who are the people that continue to suffer today? Who are the people that are speaking and like carrying the voices of like queer, like trans folk in refugee camps, right? Like if I were to relate this to, back up to this day, her name is being said, like her name's Jennifer Laude, who was a victim of the SODFA and like military presence in the Philippines. But like here, what does that look like, right? Especially if we're talking about police, we're talking about police presence, we're talking about the budgets of the police. And I think that Pride is an opportunity for us to go beyond that, because Stonewall isn't just a few days in the year when we're out in the streets. It's all day, every in the year before and after that, when these queer and trans folk are back and suffering the weight of the world. It's like someone branding their thing rainbows, and then after that they're gonna switch back to the regular brand, and they're still poor. They still don't have access to healthcare. They still don't have access to education. And I think if you were to relate this back to like nonprofit roles, I think that there's an opportunity. Like again, we're here to learn from each other, but it's like now let's actually get to know, right? Like if let's say there's a rally, so like organizing isn't just rallies. It's actually being there, building power with the people, right? It's creating these mass education units to what is Bill 27? What is Bill 29? Why is that relevant to the queer and trans community, right? Like I think when we're talking about like refugees and the state of that, there's a campaign, right, like that has been ongoing for a long time called Status for All, and that basically talks about status for people that have been forced to migrate from their countries because of safety, because they had to leave. There's a campaign called Healthcare for All, which basically asks for healthcare for everyone, no matter what your status is, no matter whether you're like, especially if you're trans, especially if that you're someone that precarious in the system where you always have to advocate for yourself, because none of those spots, none of those spaces, no one is speaking for you. And I think that again, like relating this back to like the role of nonprofits, right? Even like the language thing, like pushing that forward and working with community organizations to be like, how can we make things more accessible? Because like there are things that cannot fully be translated from one language to another, in the same way that like if someone talked to me in like, I don't know, like a different language, and I'm like, I can't translate that because I only know what I know. And I think with Stonewall, like if this does come together, right, like the role of nonprofits, like we have this beautiful space here, and if like this were to happen again, and if there was an art bill leading up to all these events, what would it look like for us to like bring our organizations flag, but on the other side of that is the trans flag, it's the 2S LGBTQ plus flag, and like where all our flags are on the streets, right? Like in terms of like it looks like pamphlets being like spread around, like what is Bill 27, what is Bill 29, and that's something, those are resources that nonprofits can help with, is it not? But like going back to this point, sorry, I'm almost done. But it's like the trans, like I I think like these comments are like a reflection of the current misinformation that is going on in the city. Like whether that's even like something that people have felt out from the city. But I think that also tells us the work that needs to be done and how we can like come together in order to push things forward. So I guess my question too for folks who are here today, get creative, bring this back to organizations. Like these are questions being asked that don't have full answers until people actually discuss them more, think on them more, process it, come back, and then we try things out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If what does, we'll keep doing it.
Thank you. So we moved to folks who wanted both. There are 10, we picked 2. Why should organizers tell individuals and groups participating in this event how they should conduct themselves? This is an event for community. I think community members should be allowed to conduct themselves, celebrating or protesting as they see fit. I think it is important to take a political action, but it's also important to celebrate how far we have come. Once again, that's the survey that we did. Renee, next slide. Sorry.
We're just doing some background research on the protest. The presence versus the march, the policing.
Yes. No police officer will not be marching. This is a comment from Edmonton Pride Fest. No police officer will not. No, police officers will not be marching in 2025 Edmonton Pride Parade. However, the Edmonton Police Service is actively collaborating with Pride organizers to ensure the safety and security of all festival guests and parade participants. They are involved in emergency response planning and in supportive non-participatory role. And there was a response that I would feel more safe and secure with the team of roller derby skaters patrolling the event. Let's see if the police spend their energy protecting the anti-choice LGBTQ protesters instead of the people being targeted like they always have done previously. Exactly, right? I would actually also feel safer with roller derby.
They've gone a little bit farther than that. Like if you look on their Instagram, they also say we are exploring other ways they can show support for safety community initiatives without marching. So it's like they're still leaving that door open. It makes me feel like they are not understanding what is being asked, what is being shared with them when we say it is not safe for police presence to be there, So it feels like an extreme lack of understanding.
It is. It is.
I think that they don't want to get involved in political or questionable kind of issues where the community might think that they're going to break up, where they're demonstrating that they're they're can't stand their work, so we're not.
It's okay, like just chew on the thought it will come. Think of it. Next slide. Yes, so this is the final slide. But I wanted to share a few things, to break down a few things. That whenever trans people come at the forefront to do this work, we are easily targeted. You know why? We don't have access to legal support. We don't have money to do legal support, so someone can bully you, can do all that. You go to do a consultation for a lawyer, it's $600 an hour. You don't have it. You don't even perhaps make it, right? We are literally struggling. We don't have family connections. Our families disown us, right? Some of us, you are our community. Like some of us don't have fathers to talk to. Some of trans people don't talk to their mothers. Some of trans people don't have sisters to talk to, brothers to talk to. We have you, our community. So when I'm fighting for my family, you, my family. When a trans person speaks, I'm not speaking for my own benefit, but I'm speaking for other trans generations that are to come. Because this is what my ancestors did. This is what Mashapi did. This is what Dr. Michael did. It is the same thing I am doing. It is the same thing B is doing. Us openly telling you, it takes courage, it takes effort to share our stories from places and places and places. This is a space that I feel free to share. I can walk, I can dance. But there are some spaces where you find me like this. You get what I'm saying? And I don't know if you ever experienced this. Because it is not a safe, it's not an inclusive space for me to be free. For me to dance and run without being judged. And this is why we do this work. So me and Radhika engaging with pride, we were told we are dividing the community. Are we dividing the community? Do you think we are dividing the community? To ask for what is rightly for the community, to reclaim pride spaces, to reclaim spaces, to include trans people in pride spaces. We are not asking, we are not dividing nobody. The other parties that I want to address is within the non-for-profit towards LGBTQ non-for-profit is the racism, the queer racism that is not being talked about, that is not being addressed, right? Because this is manifesting, this is increasing from top to bottom, and no one is talking about it because when the community is marginalized, they take it as an entire group. But LGBTQ community has different spectrums. Even us trans people, we have different lived experience. My needs are not these needs. My needs are not nobody's needs. I have different needs. So my other query is for you as non-for-profit leaders, as policymakers, to make policies that are intentional to including gender diverse people. You're aware of pronouns, you're aware of your name, and when folks were starting, you introduced your names, you introduced your pronoun. That is a first step. Right? Does your organization does that? Do you have that silence treatment? When you see a trans person walk and you are that silence treatment when a trans individual, someone who's different, walks in and you're like, oh. That happens in our non-for-profits, right? And it manifests within pride spaces. It manifests within our own lives, right? So when we are excluded, when our own community excludes us, our families have disowned us, our people don't want to talk to us, all we have left is to fight for our community, is to fight for what our ancestors did. They fought for this, and we hope you're on board. We hope we don't have to explain ourselves as to why there should be trans spaces, as to why in your organization you should have a trans table, you should have a trans desk, and that trans desk should have trans people who are paid to do the work, who are paid to offer knowledge. We are wisdom keepers. We are the backbone of, we are the antidote of isolation, antidote of oppression, trans people. So you need to end oppression, bring us in. And let us, don't restrict us. Don't, how do they call that when you work and you're being followed, you are being looked at, you are, not stop. There is something.
Micromanage?
That's it. That's the one.
I feel you.
Right? Please, stop micromanaging us. We are capable beings. Trans people are capable of changing the world. You had Victor. Almost LGBTQ organizations in Africa were started by trans people. Maybe you need to do some research in Edmonton, in Alberta. And I guarantee you, 95% of organizations will have had a hand of a trans person there. But you'll find that in some of those organizations, they don't hire trans people. They don't have trans people hired. When pride comes on, when pride conversation comes on, they do not even consult trans people. They do not hear what trans people really, and that is the community we need to go to. That is the community we need to go to. The other piece I wanted to address, and this came from the queer community, the 2S LGBT community. When they come in your spaces, they feel already discriminated the moment they walk in. I don't know how you're doing. So something has to change. They walk in, they feel like they're already taking. You give them that look that you're here to take things from us. You give them that look that you don't have. You are here for us to help you. Right? So that needs to change. That needs to change so that we can be intentional about including folks in our spaces, especially when we bring into us LGBTQ communities. They are in dilemma. They are in need of resources. They will do whatever it is to get food. They will do whatever it is. But these are human beings, you know? However much we don't know the language, however much we don't know the culture, teach us the culture. Don't discriminate us. You know, we are tired of facing racism, of things we can't change. I cannot change my gender identity. You know, I always say if I wanted to change this, I would have when I was young, because I was beaten at a young age, 5, 6, just for stealing my brother's shoes and wear them. I'm beaten every day, right, for that. I'm handcuffed, I'm arrested. I'm undressed for being who I am. Mama Anita, Mama Snow shared what happened to her. That's disgusting. No human being should ever go through that. I keep saying, I should never have been discriminated. I should never have been undressed. I should never have been vaginally examined by cops. Who gave them that opportunity? Who gave them that power to do that? You know? So when we come here, we come with a lot of that experience. We come with a lot of that trauma. We don't have at home where to put it. We don't have a box at home to put racism I faced yesterday. I put it in this box. The transphobia I faced, I put it in this box. Right? The prejudice I faced, I put it in this box. And I will come without them. I come with all of me. And this is the part of my authenticity, which scares so many people.
I have a question in relation to the police. So I understand where you're coming from with the no police presence. I come from a country where police are not to be trusted. And I experienced that in my own family. But how do you reconcile this idea that police are the only thing that can protect us? So myself going into the space, going to the parade, and all of a sudden you start to see violence. The first thing I look for in Canada is the police. How do you explain to people that there's other alternatives to police presence? How do you protect people in the space, on the street, when there's violence, and there is no police presence?
That's really, really a good question. And it's a question that our communities continue to bring up, right? Every now and then, right? And I really want to be intentional when I'm answering it. And how do we ensure safety? We had Reverend this morning saying it's a collective, right? A community, right? Right here, how are we keeping ourselves safe? Just a question, right? There is no police officers here, right? How are we keeping? Violence can happen at any time, but how are we keeping ourselves safe? Right? There is an intentional space, the space that has been built, right? It has been built intentional, right? That there is wheelchair accessible. We are here talking. You know, anything can happen, but we are keeping each other safe, right? That's an example, one of the examples. The other example I can give you, when it comes to violence, there was a comment of roll dubbings, right? Back in the day, and this is not in Canada, right? Police, how old is police?
1912-ish, 1912.
And how old is humanity? And I always want to ask that question. So humanity didn't keep themselves safe then. So the root cause of police here is to enslave black people, take indigenous people's land, take indigenous children away from them, kill and murder black people, this is truth. Unlike trans people, attack cut trans people. I will not ignore that a big portion of communities feel safe around police. But our community needs time to heal. I always also give an example. If I brought you in my home today, right? And in fact, like Renee had brought us all here and Marika, and I start lifting things up, let go. Tomorrow, will Renee bring me back? Right? No, right? That is what police did. Now, if I want to come back in the room, I have to first reconcile. I have to tell the truth. I have to tell Renee where that came from. And police is not willing to do that. So that means they will never be safe for us until they're able to do that, right? So I always want to bring these pieces so that it's easily understandable, right? When we, in Christianity, they say when someone slaps you this side, give them another one to slap you this side. But my ancestors tell me when someone slaps you this side, walk away or slap them back. Defend yourself, right? Defend yourself. We have lost many trans people, many black people, many killed by black people at the hands of police. The number keeps growing. Now, even police has lost people, right? There's some officers that are murdered on work job, right? We recognize because we are human beings, right? But that it being self, I also ask myself, I was in this space again, and I said, who do police go to when they are being unlived? But then I also ask myself, how many cases of police being unlived? And I also ask myself, how many cases of black trans people, black people that are not even seen on video? If the one which is reality seen on video, police can tell their story, their fake story, yet you can clearly see that police has murdered. Police murdered Matthias here in Edmonton. Me, as a black trans person, who, when someone sees me, can see a cis man, I am not far away from Matthias. I can easily, someone can call police and I can be murdered right on. What are you gonna do? Right? I mean, it has happened. It has continuously happened. I don't know if you want to add on you. You got the notes. Yes, this is Matthias. Do you know what the police chief said? It was the nature of the job to murder a black man. It's always the nature of the job to murder a black trans person. It is the nature of their job. Now, we do not need that in pride. We do not even need to be around them. Because if the nature of their job allows them to murder me, what if they murder me at pride? And I've actually never had any violent incident in pride, in spaces that are LGBTQ, that are really colorful. People are really jolly, people are really intentional, people are really caring. So, yeah. GIC, you're organizing your business.
I'm going to post this because I might forget. Sorry, what's your name? Well, which country are you from?
I'm from Chile.
Ooh, rough. I've gotten the opportunity to meet some very cool Chilean organizers, and y'all have really very cool history. I think, first of all, thank you for asking that question. I think that's a question that a lot of people would ask, and sometimes kind of shy away from because they're kind of worried about how like people would respond or how they would answer it. I kind of heard your question as well, Carol, in terms of like might be thousands of people. It's a fair question to ask. Like, what does safety look like, right? I guess in that sense, does anybody know the history of who here is familiar with the Oka crisis? Sorry? Yes. But in terms of community safety, what actually happened? But in terms of community safety, do we know what happened? Okay, cool. That's okay. I might be wrong, and this is how I know so far because I've researched it multiple times, but I might be wrong. They actually banned, because it was indigenous people, right? Protecting their land, yes? Okay. They were like, you know what? It's your land, but then after this, they said you can't carry your own gun to protect your own land. Do we know when Pekiwewen happened a few years ago? That prayer camp that happened in downtown? Could you tell me more about that, Sylvia?
Yeah, there's a lot of folks kind of creating a safe space for unhoused people and creating an intentional community right down here in the river valley, which is a really traditional gathering space. Like it's right by like traditional burial lands where there's like 20,000 years of archaeological history. It's a really special place. There's this intentional community, or am I projecting that?
Oh, I don't know. It's all good. Oh, sorry, sorry.
So yeah, like intentional community, yeah, and kind of calling for city council to end houselessness. And it was a really great space for a long time, and then some internal things happened. I can't speak to the details.
Of course.
Yeah.
Me either. I was merely a witness. I helped out here and there, but I cannot take credit because there were like organizers that were on the ground pushing that every day. Like at the time that it ran. So, do you happen to know what the police did? They were dumping people who are unhoused and intentionally overloading the Pekiwewen camp so that they wouldn't be able to deal with the demand. So instead of actually taking them to shelters, they would just keep dumping on Pekiwewen until they were overwhelmed. And another thing cool with Pekiwewen, because of course, with any project you run into some issues, but I think it was kind of a landmark in the sense of like it was one, if not like of the very few, if not the first of its kind, and like what it provided, right? So what was the name of that? It's not the Bear Clan, like it was the Brotherhood that were going around and they were the ones patrolling. So there were no cops, but they were the ones patrolling, like keeping an eye on community. That happened here in Edmonton, right? So I think legislation-wise, it's important for us to visit like those histories. I think that would be a cool workshop that maybe a nonprofit can research into as to why like we shouldn't want cops at Pride. I don't know, I'm just putting it out there. You have a grant that you're trying to. What do you see police presence as? You don't want to talk.
Security.
Yeah.
Security.
We here went to. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a fair question. We here went to the University of Alberta. What was that called? Safe Walk or something?
Yeah.
Okay. And also, doesn't have to be cops. It can be EMS folk. If someone's having a hot day, it's really hot, send them to EMS. Doesn't have to be a cop. If there's a fire, send a firefighter. But we understand these limitations where if EMS says that it's too unsafe, they're gonna call the cops anyway. Right? And again, I don't think that we can predict whoever we're going to get EMS-wise, but if that's something that the Pride Fest can organize in terms of stationed EMS folks, that actually eliminates a lot of like our thing, like if someone goes through something. Because more often than not, it's it's going to be okay. We were okay a few years ago. We're going to be okay now. We're still okay. And in terms of, we're still okay. We're still here, you know, like gunshots and like, you know, crutches and et cetera, and, you know, refugee camps, and then you're here, like your transphobia, we're still here, see, we're kicking. I can't kick right now, but anyway, so I think another part that, does that answer your question? I think it's still like an involvement thing. I think that's something that's good for us to be kind of real about, because currently that's the state of this province, especially in light of like increasing police budgets. Okay, maybe we should one thing I forget. Is that okay? I'm also going to relate this to the fact that, did folks hear about the Lapu-Lapu tragedy that happened in Vancouver? Where many people died. Do you know what the police said after that? They blamed it on mental health and said that, oh, it's just someone going through mental health stuff. Of course, with contradictions within my own community, they said, oh, sira ulo yan, which means they're just broken in the head. It's because of that person. But we can't really bring it down to just one person. That's also a product of systemic inequities and how we got there, right? And with that said, were the cops there on the ground helping people while everything was going down in terms of first response, therapies, et cetera? No, it's these community organizations that barely have any funding. And I think that's something good for us to think about in terms of the privatization of healthcare and education in Alberta, right? Because I've said it before, I'm gonna keep saying it again. It's we're gonna say, oh, trans people are the minority, et cetera, but that's what we know so far. It's unsafe to be trans in Alberta. Because as what Adebayo said, what did the cops say was the nature of the job? That's true, it is the nature of the job. And when Pride happens, and then they say, let's say they find a trans person, they're a little too dangerous, they'll call them dangerous, maybe they'll call them a terrorist, or maybe they'll call them an unsafe person, maybe they'll call my crutch a gun, I don't know. But let's say someone's holding something, it was just a toy gun. I work in social services. People have been pinned down simply for having a toy gun, just because the cops called them. So I think that's something important to think about, but it's an evolving conversation in terms of what does it look like for us to keep each other safe without the need for police presence, without SWAT walking in and saying, for example, this is anti-Semitic, throwback. That's a unique festival reference. But can we get yours first?
Well, no, I was just going to add that when you talk about, I believe in the collective, I think that, right, historically, we've taken care of ourselves. My concern is that people don't realize the power they have with the collective and their part in the collective. And I think we get the division in the decision, let's say, just this particular issue of police presence or no police presence, is that sometimes we're not proactive enough to say, let's talk about that, and then put that conversation in relation to pride. Let's talk about that, and then put that in relation to pride. Because I can already hear, and I know, because I work with a lot of people like this, you say no police presence, and they go straight to, well, how can we be safe? Well, how, right? So I try to answer those questions, and part of the problem is that the individual has to see themselves in the picture, not outside of the picture. So I was wondering how we bring that change, internal change to the individuals.
That's a great question. You got
Can I add to that? Okay, so I organize a lot of hip-hop events, and hip-hop is always associated as gangbang and da-da-da-da-da, this and that, right? Because mainstream hip-hop talks about a lot of, excuse my language, hoes and flows. However, a lot of the youth that I work with, and I do work with youth, we have security. You don't need to get security from cops.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I mean. How do we explain this to those people who don't understand that?
I
If
think
I say
Part of that security, right?
because security is everywhere now. If you haven't recognized it around your areas, if you go to the mall, how many security is walking, right? How many security bodies are literally walking a lot more now than before?
So I'll just, this is a conversation I had with an individual once where I said, you know how in university we had to walk together in groups, or when I go to the bathroom in a bar, I always go with a girl, right? That's collective security.
No
Yeah,
codes.
I'll remember. But there's a lot of people who don't take that and put that in relation to this conversation. Do you understand what I mean? So when I give that example, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But there isn't enough of that out in the space of this conversation to allow people to see themselves in that collective. They always see it from the outside looking in, right? So I think posing that question is relevant because people are going to say to you, well, that doesn't make sense. And so as soon as it doesn't make sense, you're out, right? As soon as you don't make sense in their paradigm, the way that they think, everything you do doesn't make sense.
I wanted to say this thought because of what you're saying, right? It points me to social justice, right? and the systems that we are living in, right? We're saying, the systems that we are living in we're not built for us, right? We're not built for us. So when we are here, they don't know how to treat us. They don't know how to behave around us. And when you don't know how to deal with something, you just want to get rid of it. That's the depth of the reality. So navigating white supremacist systems, racist systems, it is hard. I don't think police can even have such conversations with us because of their power dynamics that can be into